Yo, so if your timeline's been anything like mine recently, you've probably had Melo-Grime all over your feed.
So next year, don't want to see any of the man them on the block. Said that he's gonna make me proud. Get that Skepta, take a photo, blue t-shirt with a Superman logo. The bad boys are back, blowing up shit like a bomb in Iraq.
These tracks are pure vibes, man, super nostalgic. I can see why they've been going viral recently. But how are these viral tracks actually made? And that's the purpose of this video. Today, I'm leaking the entire formula to making these type of beats. And believe it or not, these type of songs do have a surprisingly simple 3-step formula.
Welcome to the party. I got the X, the shrooms, the acid.
So step 1 is to find some vocals. Let's listen to a few Melo-Grime tracks to see what we're looking for. 2 remixes I've been banging out recently are You Think You're Big by Hayes.
You think you're big? I can tell you think you're big.
And then this one's been going super viral. It's called The Hood Dream and it's Skepta remixed by 808 Mystic.
So I sold it. I'm fine. Whatever I know is the label I've already signed.
The numbers on that one are absolutely insane. So yeah, we know the exact vocals and vibe that we're looking for now, and I think I've found a hidden gem. Since these remixes became so popular, there's been a few very rinsed hooks and verses from specifically JME, Skepta, Wiley, which you're hearing everywhere. So the main thing for me when trying to find some vocals was to look for stuff that I hadn't really heard before. And I think I've done that. The song I came across is Skepta, Lukey World.
I cry tears in my cup of Hennessy for these fucked up memories. Cut niggas off for them bad vibes and them fucked up energy.
It's on only 1.8 million views, which is pretty low for Skepta 9 years ago, and I actually really like the song. It's paying homage to his friend who unfortunately passed away. His name must have been Luke or Lukey. So yeah, man, I think I'm going to go put my own spin on this one. So I've got the vocal NFL and I'm going to run you through the effects I've got on it. We've got simple EQ, cutting out some of the lows, which weren't necessary, some highs, and a little bit of the mids. An NS1 stereo noise suppressor, which just helps to get rid of some of the bits that the stem extractor couldn't. And a little bit of reverb so it blends in nicely when we add stuff around it. Very subtle difference, but you just want to make sure you EQ out some of those harsher frequencies because the stem extractors can kind of mess with them a bit. Now looking back at the formula, step 2, we got to find a sample.
Baby, welcome to the party. I got the X, the shrooms, the acid.
Now we could go ahead and make a melody ourselves, but in my opinion, that vintage sampled sound is what really makes these tracks so special. And you just can't get that in the box authentically unless you have crazy expensive vintage gear, which I unfortunately do not. Obviously, we could just drag in a loop from a vintage loop maker like Kavi or Oscar Zulu that does have that equipment, but there's nothing quite like sample digging and finding those gems. So that's what I wanted to do, and digging for samples, finding the gems, finding the right samples is a skill in itself, and I know finding samples isn't easy. So I'm gonna give you a few methods and a few ways that I sort of streamline and make this process a little bit faster by finding quality hidden gem samples.
Baby, welcome to the party. I got the X,
The first thing I recommend you do is if you have vinyl records or cassettes or anything like that in your house, go listen to those and try and get them in your laptop because that's just sick.
the X, the shrooms, the acid. Just you can see I'm a savage.
Obviously, the first place a lot of people go is YouTube, and that's where I go as well. I recommend looking at playlists, typing up maybe jazz playlist, old vintage playlists, whatever it is. Try the playlists.
Don't try this at home, I'm a savage.
Then maybe look through producers that you know sample a lot. So for me, I like, The Alchemist, some of Kanye's producers. There's a really cool website called Who Sampled where you can go and you can look at Kanye songs or songs produced by The Alchemist or whatever. And you can see what samples they've used and maybe listen to other songs from people that they've already sampled. Not the exact same song, but other songs by that band or that artist.
The X, the shrooms, the acid. Just you can see I'm a savage.
The website that I go to sometimes is samplet.io. Now this is not sponsored, it genuinely is a crazy website. I've found some crazy samples in here, but after a while it can start to feel like it's spitting out a lot of the same sort of samples, and in my opinion it's just not as fun. So that's a few ways that I find my samples. There's loads of different ways out there. You do whatever you find works best for you. Now the sample that I found is a song called Ooh Baby by the Escorts. The method I used to find this specific sample was to listen to a bunch of the Alchemist songs, go on Who Sampled, see what bands he sampled for some of the flips that he did. Then I found the Escorts, and then, that eventually led me to their Ooh Baby song. So once I dragged the sample in, cut it so everything was in time, and arranged it a bit, this is how it sounded.
I cry tears in my cup of Hennessy for these fucked up memories.
It has potential, but right now the sample is overpowering the vocals, so we definitely need to jump in and do some processing. My go-to when dragging in a sample is to always start with an EQ that looks something like this, just cutting out the highs, leaving space for the vocal, cutting out the lows, leaving space for the bass, which we're going to bring in later. So this EQ along with the reverb is all that I've done.
I cry tears in my cup of Hennessy for these
Way more room for Skepta's vocals now. Now, as well as time stretching the sample, I also pitched it up 1000 cents, which is almost a whole octave, which means that the bass was too high and just wouldn't have sounded good if I left it in. So I cut that out and went ahead and drew in my own bass. Only effect I've got on this bass is this real ADT stereo on the creamy smooth bass preset. I've really been liking this plugin for basses recently. This is the bass progression I came up with, and how I came up with it was I just followed the bass that was in the sample but replaced it with my own. Here's a bit of source if you're struggling to find the bass notes. Pull up this VST called Wave Candy, put it on spectrum mode, turn the scale all the way up, pitch it up and push play. And as you can see, there's a bass note F, still on F, oh yep, A sharp to C. You get the picture. So do that if you can't find the bass notes. This is a big gem and changed everything for me.
I cry tears in my cup of Hennessy for these fucked up memories.
Sounding cool, but I thought since we've got the bass, we might as well add a nice vintage piano on top, just to give the ear something to focus on, because I thought with the EQ and the reverb, it washed out the sample a little bit. So yeah, I threw this piano on, just came up with some chords from the bass notes, and for these type of mellow, jazzy beats, you want to be using minor 7th, minor 9th, major 7th, major 9th, 5th, suspended, diminished chords, fancy chords, basically. This is a triad, and to get a minor 7th, you just skip one note in the scale, add one, skip one, add one. But I recommend messing around. As you can see, this isn't exactly a minor 9th. I just messed around and added the A, which is taking the A up an octave from here. And I often use this little octave trick. As you can see, we've got it going A and A. We've got E and E. I use it all the time. So yeah, just mess with the voicings, mess with the chords until you find something cool. For the effects on the piano, this vintage Wolf compressor, I find that these vintage pianos sound best a little bit compressed and with a little bit of, you know, wobble and lo-fi. Then just a relatively heavy reverb. And now I'm going to play you the melody first without the piano, then I'm going to add the piano in. So now on to step 3 of the formula, basic minimal drums.
She came with a friend. I told her meet my nigga Bari.
In this beat there are only 4 drum sounds, 5 if you include the crash. I've got 2 hi-hats, a kick, a snare, and then the crash. I got started with your standard snare, which goes on the downbeat like every other trap beat out there. I then added in a bouncy hi-hat. That hi-hat pattern was quite busy, but it's okay because it sits in the background and lets the secondary hi-hat with a more sparse pattern do some heavy lifting and add a bit of bounce. So the 2 hi-hats complement each other well, and what brings it all together is the kick. The kick really ties everything together, and then I added a crash every 16 bars. So here is the full beat. Kind of feels like we're missing something that you hear in a lot of these Melo-Grime beats, and that is the soulful vocals. Luckily, this sample came with some vocals which I extracted separately. I just messed around with these to get something that sounds like this. Sounding super fire, and the vocals are there, but they're in the back, leaving space for the Skepta vocals to come back in. And that's why I extracted them separately. So I've EQ'd these vocals a little bit, just cutting out the lows. I got S1 image stereo. Now this plugin really does the magic. So the Skepta vocals and these vocals are in the middle like this, and what it does is it pushes these higher vocals from the sample out wide, leaving space for Skepta's vocals to take up the middle and be the prominent vocal. Then all we've got is a little bit of reverb and a low cut, and that's all we have for the vocals. How I came up with these chops is I literally just messed around with the vocal. I was lucky in that it worked really nicely. And I say lucky, but it's because I chose a good sample at the start. So don't underestimate spending time and picking that crazy sample. So now when I throw the Skepta vocals back in over the top of this finished beat, it all comes together perfectly. I'm gonna leave you lot to listen to the full final product. But first, if you're struggling with these kind of beats, go down to the link in the description. I've put a stash of my favorite drum sounds for making these type of beats, which might help you out. If you liked the video, make sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment, letting me know what you thought of this remix that I've done.
Skepta next year, don't wanna see any of the man them on the block. Said that he's gonna make me proud. Tracksuit mafia straight to the top. Said when the money comes in, then all of the man them are setting up shop. He told me man are gonna be smiling. Told me champagne gonna pop. I can hear